We find many references to this style of practice in ancient India. The great realized master Tilopa gave the following instruction to his disciple Naropa, saying, the best instruction to increase your spiritual practice is the Lama. So practice this Naropa. Here the instruction which is imparted by Tilopa then is that which will cause one's practice, spiritual practice, to increase is none other than the practice of pleasing one's spiritual master. So he is encouraged to abandon all other practices and just to work upon that singular practice. Also we find later in the 11th century there was a Kagyupa master who went by the name of Gosampa. And Gosampa mentions in his writings there are many who practice the generation stage yoga, but few who meditate on the Supreme Lama. Of all the types of recitation of request to the Lama is supreme. If one is not separate from that, it is certain one will achieve omniscience. So here, when one looks at the practices of the secret mantra, Vajrayana, one receives within the confines of the highest tantric practice and an empowerment, and it depends on that one engages in the development and the completion stage practices. So from within the variety of generation stage yogas, that is to say, visualizing oneself as the deity and doing the subsequent yogas or meditations. What is better than all of those is practicing the meditation on the spiritual master. So from within this viewing oneself as a divinity, there are certain things to be recited, certain jhanis and mantras and so forth. So from within all of those, the best thing to recite, or that is to say, from within all the different types of recitation, the best type of recitation is a request to one's spiritual master. And if one is not separated from that, that is to say, if one continually recites the request to one's spiritual master, there is no doubt that one will achieve the state of omniscience, complete and perfect Buddhahood. So that is the meaning then of that short quotation by the great master who achieved the state of complete and perfect Buddhahood in one lifetime, the great Gautama.
then the chili to Jenny, then the Lebanon, the Tawani, Tam the Singing Tam and Beverly, Santa Julie, Tukin Temple, One, Sovichi and Medome, Passion to be Chubby Neighbor Children, the Dutch day in the Tane, or the Lamana, Sandy Room to see her, Namala Happy Yedam, Yoba Matebet, Namada Yedamni, more yet never him at the top. The top to the in Martina, Namala Happy Yedam Yoba Mona,
to emphasize this point, there's a quotation from the Tantras, within which we read that viewing the spiritual master and the Vajradhara as separate from one another, one will fall. So here then, what one is told is that one is a spiritual master who bestows powers and so forth upon one. It should be viewed as indivisible from the great Vajradhara. If one holds the view that Vajradhara is some kind of divine thing, whereas one's spiritual master is an ordinary fellow, then one falls in the sense that one will not achieve the kind of state of a spiritual realization, because this comes about through then viewing the spiritual master as inseparable through inseparable from Vajradhara and practicing according to that Vajradhara's instructions. If one thinks there is another Vajradhara or there is another meditational deity outside of one's spiritual master, then this view will unfortunately be one's downfall, or will not achieve the state of a realization, spiritual realization, through holding on to such a wrong view. As is mentioned, or rather as is illustrated in the biography of the great translator Marpa, he was an individual who, as you may know, went to India 3 times, and on his 3rd visit there, receiving teachings from his spiritual master, Naropa. He was accompanying his master through northern India. They reached a place known as Pulahari, and in Pulahari there are some caves, dwelling places. So he and the master then retired for the night, and at dawn, when they were waking up, then Naropa shouted out to Marpa, "Hey, come and look, your meditational deity has arrived in the sky." So Marpa went up to where his spiritual master was, and in the sky in front of him beheld his meditational deity, which was Vajra, surrounded by the deities of the mandala house, etc., blazing with wondrous glory. And he looked at his spiritual master, who smiled in return and said, "Who are you going to prostrate to? Me, your old spiritual master, or to the mandala in front of you?" Which Marpa thought, well, I see Naropa every day. This is the first time I've seen this kind of a vision, so I'm going to prostrate to the vision. So he started prostrating to the vision of his meditational deity and its mandala house, at which Naropa said, before even the word Buddha, there is no Buddha who does not come about independent. There is no Buddha which comes about without relying on the spiritual master. All the 1,000 Buddhas of this aeon perfectly relied upon the spiritual master to achieve omniscience. All meditational deities are just the display of the spiritual master's enlightened mind. And with that, it is said that he snapped his fingers, and the whole vision of the mandala then dissolved within his heart. So then Marpa felt terrible regret at this time, and openly kind of tore this out, or kind of confessed this. To which Naropa replied, "It doesn't really matter, but it's a sign that your Dharma lineage will flourish, but your bone lineage, that is to say your family lineage, will be very short." And as you know, then subsequently his son Dharmadodi was killed in a riding accident, thereby cutting his particular family or bone lineage. So here then is imperative that when viewing the practices of the sutras, especially the mantras, then one should not look for an extraordinary meditational deity or Vajradhara outside of one's respective spiritual masters. By viewing them as indivisible, then one achieves, through following those instructions and acting accordingly, one achieves supreme spiritual realization. Also the great Mokchopa, Rinpoche, says in his writings, the great Mokchopa Rinpoche used to continually have visions of meditational deities, and when asked about his practice and his visions, he would say, Avalokiteshvara's face may be whiter than white, and Vajrapani is bluer than blue. The only thing that's in my mind is the face of the spiritual master. So this is an extreme benefit to us if we think about the meaning of his words. So continuing with our reading of the text, in general, all the Bodhisattvas have said that one should never see the ordinary failings of a human being, an ordinary human being, in one's spiritual master. Here then, if you wonder what is really meant by that, if you think that you see something low or base in your spiritual master, one should just consider how this is a reflection of one's own impure attitudes, or of one's own kind of expectations, or feeling that one should act in a certain way, so one's own attitude. How are you really able to know what is and what isn't base? Here then, when one relies upon the spiritual master, if he or she engages in some kind of action which doesn't really fit within the scope of our appreciation, one shouldn't then react to this immediately. Rather, one should try to look at the beneficial effect of such an interaction. As is mentioned previously in the mind training or the Locho discourse, within the confines of spiritual practice, one should continually be looking at or looking out for one's own the faults and not dwelling on the faults of others. We have so many preconceived ideas of how things should or should not be. So rather than just running after our own whims, we should rather look in an open and kind of straightforward way at what is actually being done. With regard to the activities of our spiritual master, then we should see this as being solely for the benefit of ourselves or for others, and without dwelling on the faults. Then we should look at the beneficial qualities. Now you may wonder, well, I try my hardest to rely on such spiritual teacher, but the faults nevertheless arise to my mental continuum or mind. Even though the faults may arise, it's important not to react to those faults, but rather to utilize whatever appears as the spiritual path, because the spiritual masters can put on a variety of displays of attitude, etc., in order to benefit their disciples. As is mentioned here, when Sangha was doing a retreat on Maitreya Buddha, he perceived the Buddha Maitreya as a worm-ridden bitch. When he saw that animal in such agony, he developed an intense compassion, and through that was able to purify blockages in his spiritual experience and perceive Maitreya directly. This is after having meditated upon Maitreya for 12 years, we should add. In addition to that, Naropa first saw the great enlightened being Tilopa as a lunatic, catching fish and then roasting them alive, or catching fish and eating them alive. And also in the sutra known as the meeting of the father and son, there's a tale of how the Buddha manifested as a demon in order to bring about the kind of spiritual development within a certain disciple. So in view of these incidents, how can one believe that the faults that one thinks one has seen or one seems to see in one's spiritual master are real? One should just continually reflect on how one's spiritual master is none other than the Buddha in person, and that what appears to one's mind may not be that reliable, but rather may just be a reaction based upon a previous disposition. As is mentioned in the root text of the Gyosamaja Tantra, and also in Asvagosha's 50 verses on the correct reliance on the spiritual friend, there is no graver error than saying or believing that one's spiritual master has a fault and abandoning such a master. Here then, one should look at the root Tantra of the Gyosamaja, within which we find the following quotation. Even heavy negative actions, such as the 5 heinous actions and so forth, can be purified through relying upon this method. However, abandoning the spiritual master from the path, abandoning one's spiritual master from the heart, there is no method to turn back such action. So here the meaning of this quotation is that even if one has engaged in incredible negative action, that kind of karmic seedling or that potential can be purified through relying upon this. This refers then to seeing the spiritual master as none other than the fully enlightened one, and then engaging in his special meditations, etc., and then there through achieving the state of completely perfect Buddha in one lifetime. That is entirely possible. However, if one abandons one's spiritual master from the very depth of one's heart, then this is even greater negative action, and then this negative action is not one that can be reversed because one has abandoned the method of reversing it. One has abandoned the spiritual master. So then, how should we practice? As is mentioned here, one should practice proper reliance on the spiritual master, Guru Yoga, as related in the biography of Lama Dromtong Gyalpa. So this individual was a principal disciple of Atishas, and if you read his biography and that of his contemporary, who is known as Rinpoche, you find that their biographies are completely different in the sense that Dromtong Rinpoche relied on very few spiritual masters, but had very intense practice with each and every one of them, whereas Rinpoche went to many teachers and received all kinds of instructions. Here then, one is advised to practice, as in the case of Lama Dromtong, who relied perfectly on a few spiritual masters, but never did even the slightest action to displease his masters, perfectly practicing their instructions. So, once one has accepted a spiritual master, meditate so as not to give rise to any disrespect or unworthy thoughts, even if one's life is at stake. Here then, Lama Tsongkhapa mentions in his poem, the root of all causes producing happiness here and hereafter is the practice of relying in thought and action upon the spiritual friends who reveal the path. Seeing this, follow them at all cost, and please them with the offering of one's practice. I, a spiritual practitioner, did that myself. You who wish to achieve liberation should do likewise. So here then, the last two lines, the first of which Tsongkhapa is emphasizing how he himself is just expressing his activity or his practice, and then encouraging his disciples that if they would like to achieve the same state of spiritual realization, they should just copy him to do exactly what he has had. The practices that he engaged in and that his disciples engaged in are then the same. So as we conclude here, this advice was given purely out of compassion and not because Tsongkhapa himself wanted his disciples to honor or glorify it.
Ona lam de bishing tetara baby tenki. Kashi to be chibi niba chabona, but chita mujo damna. Sini ke chitara tambi tambi chu sujan to nyamru lambi. Judan de Yugon, the Shindu near Kashi, Yana Twenty with a new Egyptian noble and Habandi, and did the Chabal and Habi, Kashi to be Chuba came and do be. And again, Malefon from Kartune, Mulu Lenti Tobandi, Olo from Mason and Magena, my dear Ruataka. Said the Dandini, Yamo Trubatita, Yamu so Tuniki Samba, one of them Chuchini, Pablo Sonda to Chudia Kanacha from Bondi. Teju de Jane, Mitaba Gomba Soji, Kaji Tili di Chushi, Yaso Malana, Juma, Nieto Jane Che, Moin Butality but Kitchen. Now, on a lump to be seen it, Tetan Baby Dane, Passion to be Chubby Giba Chabu Yana, Kakar to what is Senna. Sini digi chitara dambi chusujen de nyamso langu waris. Ati chuyang judan dibu goni shin de nye kashi nesi ta tanju gu lutin sungu. Juyu goni nye baka watan dibu goni nye baka wetini tanju gu lutin di nye na tuanchewe tanju yijin ju nobu le habandi tawetin di yijin nole ha sumba yinda hondi habandi yendin di cheba le habi Kashi to be Chuba came into base. You think, Tana? Yes, Malik said it. Malik. Listen, Besirayama, Sojaviki. Malik Solson, Kartune, Melu Linti, Tobandi, also Mason and Magena, my ear Jubadanga. Send it and you need to Siamo Trubatinasta, send it in the Betan, do at the near Joan of Sobato. Yes, also at the Tina. You go to the some Becone Hombe, Trisha, Juniana, Tobe, Sonda so Treaty, Kana Chasubundi, Thank you, Sejani, Mutaba Bomba Soji, Kaji Trinity Treaty, Yanso Malona, Duman Yetsu, Jelle Chase, and Tata, Jidin Treaty, the Jidin Treaty, Napota, Chawota, Carbuchen, for that day. And Arato. Jidin Treaty Bangu, Jidin Treaty, Kana Chasun Kamalo Bangu, and that Robert said the Nabi Shemepon and the Robert Sondam Chevati, and the Treaty Gabuchin. Nebuso, Tuniki, Sambepon and Rombetini, Treaty Chevat and Nebaduso, Treaty Saudi. Said the Tandu into Shemotrovati, and Treaty Napoche, to that Treaty Kana Chasun the but they do Jennifer, send him a Jennifer Lusa, Medaba Gomba Soji, yet to me the Trishi. Medaba Goni, Choa Medaba, Telefone, Kata Shin to me this, Kanela, Salatayani, and Mutuba Meva, Kaji to me the Trishi. Yanso Malana, Duman Yenter Ken Chase, Rambim Duma de Honor and Royal, Yangati, Jindali, some charge. Yes.
So then the reason for relying on such a spiritual friend, look on page 6, the first column. At this point the question may arise, if I should try to rely upon a spiritual master who points out the path to enlightenment and should try to please that master by making the offering and practicing his or her instructions, what exactly is meant by the offering of one's spiritual practice? One receives some instructions, but then what does one actually do with them? Here, practice means taking upon oneself the responsibility of continually living in accordance with those instructions or with the Dharma teachings. The teachings which are then presented to one by one's spiritual master. Through working with one's spiritual master, within the confines of action, cause and effect, one takes advantage then of this human life, which is something extremely valuable and a dependence upon which one is actually able to engage in kind of wholesome spiritual activity. This particular life form is something which is really difficult to find, and once found, it can be easily lost. Even so, making use of this becomes paramount, because through making use of it, this life then becomes meaningful. It becomes then likened to then this wish-granting gem. Other than doing this, there is no offering of practice. So here then, one should kind of brace oneself and do not let the once attained opportunity afforded by this human life kind of slip away. If you do not utilize this tremendous potentiality, is your heart not rotten, the Tibetan says, or vain, is his translation here. So brace your teeth, that means kind of really to kind of brace yourself for that and then engage wholeheartedly in the spiritual practice, so that one can really extract some value from this life. It is a borderline value to listen or practice the Dharma with a motivation which is mixed with white, black or grey aspects of the 8 worldly Dharmas. So here then, what is mentioned by a kind of worldly Dharma is the motivation to outdo one's enemies and protect one's friends, which is praised by worldly people, but actually quite shallow. The motivation then, the black motivation to selfishly hoard material benefit, a universally condemned motivation. And then the motivation of impressing others, which some think good and some despise. So if one does not meditate upon such grounding topics as one's mortality, one's coming death, one's impermanence and so forth, then it's very difficult for one to kind of pass beyond mundane thought patterns. So then one has the risk then of the spiritual instruction ebbing away, and then the predominant and familiar destructive emotions taking hold of one's mind. On the other hand, if one practices the pure Dharma well, and with no pretense, the foundations of lasting happiness are quickly and firmly laid. So then, this rather speaks for itself. One has then the foundation for future spiritual well-being through utilizing the time one has. So then, one is advised to discard kind of worldly activity as one would discard husk. If one thinks about rice or barley which has a husk, of course the rice and the barley, we can eat them, they're worthwhile keeping. But a husk. It has no use whatsoever. So just as a farmer, when harvesting his crop, discards those husks, then in the same way, when harvesting the crop of engaging in spiritual practice, utilizing this human condition or situation, one should then cast aside everything that would render one's practice worthless, that is to say, worldly, an overindulgence in a worldly activity, and through seeing that as like a husk and casting that away, one kind of engages solely in the life in practice as taught by one's spiritual master. Works of no positive consequence in spirituality, of great peril. Take up the essence of the Dharma so that at the time of death, one will not depart from this life with regret. Furthermore, one should think that I should practice right now, drink the waters of meditation, relieve the thirst of wishing to hold life's essence. As Tsongkhapa mentions in his poem, human life found but this one time, more precious than the wish-fulfilling gem, so hard to regain and easily lost. It's brief as a flash of lightning. Seeing this, discard worldly activity like the husk of a grain, and strive day and night to take life's essence. So then, one should take the essence and opportunities provided by this human existence, should one. So the question is, how is this to be done? Here it's extremely important to have an understanding of the ways of generating actual experience of the general foundations of the paths and practices, and therefore I will briefly explain the process. The explanation will be done under two headings: how the path of the three levels of spiritual application condenses all the teachings of the fully enlightened one, and the reason for leading aspirants through these two levels. So here then it's imperative that one understands the reasoning behind this twofold division and what is actually meant or subsumed under these two titles. So then if we look at page 6 of the second column, then how the path of the three levels of spiritual application condenses all the teachings of the Buddha, if we read together. Buddha himself first developed the body-mind, the aspiration to attain perfect compassion, wisdom and power as the best means of benefiting all sentient beings. In the end, in order to benefit all beings, he actually attained full enlightenment. Then solely for the benefit of beings, he taught the Dharma teachings. The practices he taught fall into two divisions: those that aim at giving beings temporary benefit of a higher rebirth as a human or a divinity, and those that aim at giving the two ultimate benefits of liberation from samsara and the attainment of full omniscience, the The first group of practices are known as the practices of the being of initial perspective of spiritual application. Because they are used as a basis to all the higher practices, they are called common Dharma of initial perspective. The nature of the practitioner of initial perspective is outlined in Atishas' lamp for the path to enlightenment. Those who by the various methods aim at higher samsaric happiness with their own interests in mind are known as spiritual aspirants of initial or lesser perspective. That is to say, practitioners of the initial perspective are those who do not work for the pleasures of this life, but rather set their minds upon the practices leading to rebirth, either in a divine or in a human situation. For such an individual who wishes to engage in spiritual practice, it's imperative that as a foundation, one doesn't dwell within the confines of working for the temporary happiness of this life, but rather one places more emphasis on one's future existences, and as a future destination, having well-being, that is to say, rebirth within divine and human situations. If that is one's aim, then one is a person of lesser or initial spiritual capacity. Continue with our reading. The practices that yield ultimate benefit are of two types: those that yield nirvana, or liberation, that is merely a freedom from samsaric sufferings, and those that yield the liberation possessed of omniscience. The former of these are known as the practices of the person of intermediate perspective, or common Dharma of intermediate perspective, or the person of middling capacities. To quote from Atishas' lamp for the path to enlightenment, those with the aim of peace for themselves turn their backs on samsaric happiness and reverse all negative karma. They are known as spiritual seekers of intermediate perspective. That is to say, intermediate practitioners turn their backs on the securities and joys of higher samsaric positions and take up the practices of the three higher trainings in order to attain for themselves liberation, free from the temporary, which is free of the cyclic compulsions such as karma and delusion. Finally, in addition to that practice outlined above, the methods which accomplish the liberated state of omniscience or complete and perfect Buddhahood include all the practices of the perfection vehicle and also the esoteric vehicle. These methods are known as the exclusive Dharma of the highest perspective, or the exclusive Dharma, or the Ankama practices of the person of higher capacities. And in order to illustrate this, Atishas' lamp for the path reads, "Those who see suffering in their own lives and realizing that others suffer likewise, wish to put an end to all misery, are known as the spiritual aspirants of the supreme scope." In other words, supreme practitioners are those who, empowered by great compassion, take up such methods as the six perfections and the two stages in order to attain full Buddhahood for themselves as a method of extinguishing the suffering of others. This is how the path of the three perspectives of spiritual application condenses all the teachings of the Buddha. So now we'll break for 10-15 minutes.
נצא עכשיו מהחדר, ואז אני שנוח לחזור לכאן אחר כך ולשתות. נצא כולם עכשיו, נעבור לחדר השני או החוצה לערבים. לא להיכנס לשירותים שבצד ימין שלנו עד שכל המשלב, עד שנגיד שם.
Denma da to Denma
sabar be
dari kasih dah sabar kasih dah nimba nimba jangan juga juga sabar ya dah nimba cas sungguh
kalpitonu cici işlerden
So then if we continue with our reading, then at on page 7, the reason for leading aspirants through these 3 levels. Although the practices in all 3 levels of spiritual application are taught in the Lama tradition, this is done only because it is necessary to go through the 2 lower perspectives of practice and branches leading to the 3rd and highest perspective. In the Lama tradition, one does not take up the practices of lower perspective merely to gain the samsaric comfort of higher rebirth, nor does one take up those of the intermediate level merely to benefit oneself by gaining nirvana or liberation from cyclic existence. Both are done purely as preliminaries in practices of higher perspective. The actual body of Lama practice is the highest of the 3. Why is so much emphasis placed on the practices of highest perspective? Because there is no door to the Mahayana other than the body-mind, and this body-mind is the unique quality of practitioners of highest perspective. One must therefore develop it. In order to do this, one should begin by contemplating its beneficial effects, and thereby generate a longing to attain it. These effects are condensed into 2 categories, temporary and ultimate. The temporary effect is that the body-mind enjoys the body-mind ensures the joyous fruit of high rebirth. The ultimate effect is that it finally gives birth to the liberated omniscient wisdom of complete and perfect Buddhahood. Thus it is indispensable. As a prerequisite to body-mind, one must generate great compassion, unbearable to tolerate the sufferings of all sentient beings. This great compassion for others depends upon an intense awareness of the undesirable experiences and sufferings of one's own continuum. So once one first trains in the practices of lower perspective by contemplating the miseries experienced in the lower realms, from this contemplation arises a mind which belongs to liberation from such an unsatisfactory existence. One then enters into the intermediate practices by contemplating the transient nature of the joys of the heavens. From this contemplation arises renunciation of everything in samsara, finally thinking that all other beings face the same sufferings as does oneself. One generates compassion, which yearns to see all beings free from suffering, love, and then the body-mind. The aspiration to full enlightenment is the best means to fulfill that love and compassion, thus leading aspirants to the highest perspective of practice by first training their minds in the 2 lower perspectives is a supreme perfect approach to the spiritual practice. Here then, when we talk about spiritual practice, particularly this graduated stage of the path to enlightenment genre, we note that there are 3 types of individuals mentioned: a person of lesser, middling, and then greater capacity. And these particular individuals each have their own spiritual contemplations. Now, for a person who wishes to engage properly in the practice of the graduated stage of the path to enlightenment, such an individual is of the highest caliber, the highest capacity. Nevertheless, such an individual utilizes the contemplations of a person of middling and lesser capacity in order to kind of propel him or herself in his or her spiritual practice. So what we find is these spiritual contemplations are known as contemplations of a person, or spiritual contemplations which are common to a person of greater capacity and also lesser capacity, common with a person of greater capacity and also of middling capacity, and then the unique practices of a person of greater capacity. So in order to understand this, let us first look upon the spiritual contemplations of a person of lesser capacity. These contemplations include an appreciation for one's human situation, recognizing the usefulness of one's life, how rare it is, and what great merit or what great kind of meaning can be derived therefrom. Then one contemplates its impermanence, one's mortality. One contemplates the refuge-granting ability of the 3 jewels, and also then the karma or action, cause and effect. These contemplations then, for a person of for a person of lesser capacity or a person of greater capacity who is reflecting upon them, will drive one away from this life and propel one to looking at the future. So this is imperative for a person of greater capacity, because not only does he or she need to turn one's mind away from this particular life, but also looking at the shortcomings within the cycle of existence that one can experience from the lowest state of existence up to and including then one's human predicament. One then turns away from those and then focuses upon achieving divine and human states in the future. Then utilizing the contemplations of a person of middling capacity, within which one contemplates the general kind of dissatisfaction wrought within the cycle of a contaminated existence, and then turning away from that, focusing upon states of liberation is a necessary contemplation for a person of greater capacity, because he or she needs to focus his or her attentions out of the cycle of existence, aiming at achieving the complete and perfect Buddhahood. Understanding with oneself as the subject the shortcomings that one is undergoing, that one can undergo within the cycle of existence, one then utilizes a different subject other than oneself, other individuals, contemplating how all sentient beings have been one's parent, etc., going through the 6 courses and then generating the mind aspiring to the highest enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, opens up the gateway to them in greater physical practice. And this mind, this attitude, is one which is unique to a person of greater capacities. So you can see that this unique mindset and then the subsequent actions engaged in by such an individual are the unique spiritual contemplations of a greater individual. However, if one looks at how such a person is developed spiritually, it comes through dependence upon the contemplations which are not unique to, but are in common with a person of middling and then lesser capacities. So thus one trains one's mind serially. So then wishing to extract the essence of one's human life, then one should contemplate as follows. This precious human existence which we have now in our hands, something which is so difficult to achieve and, once attained, extremely meaningful. However, this is not something which is going to last for a long time, and it is certain that we are going to pass away from this life. This is something we can know. However, what we do not kind of contemplate is when we will actually pass away. So how long death will wait before striking is not known. Therefore, one should immediately exert oneself to extract some meaning or some essence from this short life which we have. Once one has had infinite previous lives in a variety of realms, higher, lower, intermediate, and so forth, but always the Lord of Death, like a thief in a marketplace, has stolen them all indiscriminately. How fortunate that he has let us live this long. Thus one should contemplate, whatever one's age, how wonderful that we've been able to actually live this long. Some die when they are infants, some die when they are crawling. So many people die in their infancy and so forth. It's amazing that we've been able to live this long. Thus one should appreciate the length of life one has had and strive to make use of what's left thereof. Generate a mind so filled with the awareness of death that you sit like a person hunted by a desperate assassin. So here, one should continually contemplate how one may pass away from this life in the next few moments, continually reflecting, utilizing one's awareness and intelligence. Then one should sit, and when one sits, one feels a little bit kind of on edge, as if there is an assassin waiting to kill us, perched behind the nearest bush, so to speak. Thus then one should contemplate how it's very possible that one could pass away in the immediate future. And then, at the time of death, what will be of use to us? Here then, money, possessions, friends and servants will not be able to follow us, will not be able to take anything with us. However, the traces of any negative karma created for these objects will pursue one like a shadow. So this is how we move from life to life, and this is how we should contemplate. At the moment one is just content to eat, drink, consume. Yet life, while essential objects and food just burn on, and nothing is accomplished. One should fully direct whatever remains of one's life towards truly practicing the Dharma. And furthermore, one should think to do so from today on, not from tomorrow, because death may strike tonight. So thus, through this contemplation, one feels that one needs to do something worthwhile or wholesome with the time which remains. But the length of that time is unsure, so therefore one is encouraged to immediately engage in the kind of a spiritual practice. So then, the next question is, with the exception of Dharma, nothing happens at the time of death. So then, how does Dharma help, and how does non-Dharma harm? And death, one does not simply evaporate. Death is followed by subsequent rebirth. And whatever rebirth one may take is happy, miserable, that's to say high or low. This is determined then by the state of one's mind at the time of death. So here this refers to the gross death, gross mindset at the time of one's clinical death. This doesn't refer then to the subtle death, where the kind of gross levels of mind collapse upon one another, and one is left with the subtle level of mind, which is a neutral state of mind. So then here, on a gross level, it is determined by the state of mind when one passes away. Except for the power of karma, ordinary folk are powerless. They must take rebirth, thrown to them by the force of their black and white karmic actions, or by the impressions left by a previous action of body, speech and mind. So at the time of death, If a positive thought predominates, a happy rebirth follows, and if a negative one predominates, then a destructive one follows. So then if there is a destructive or difficult to bear or endure state in the future, then one should reflect, what actually is that? So here then, one is advised to contemplate the following quotation from Nagarjuna. Remember that in the lower hells, one burns like a sun, and in the upper hells, one freezes. So here this is reference to then the variety of hot and cold hell realms that one can be reborn in through the force of one's destructive action and negative emotions. Remembering how ghosts and spirits suffer from hunger, thirst, and then the climate. So here then they are separated from food and drink, or even in the presence of food and drink are unable to partake of those. Remember how animals suffer, and this we can see with our own eyes, the consequences of stupidity. Abandon the karmic causes of such a misery and cultivate the causes of joy. Human life is something which is rare and precious, so one should not utilize this as a cause of pain. Take heed and use it well. As Nagarjuna implies, the sufferings of the hot and cold hells are unendurable. The sufferings of ghosts are horrendous, and the sufferings of animals eating one another, being domesticated and dominated by humans, being dumb and so forth, are overwhelming. As advised by the quotation earlier, we should contemplate each and every one of these difficult situations within which we could be flung at the time of our passing away, and contemplate how at the moment we cannot even hold in our hands an ember, for a few moments, for a few seconds. Perhaps we would like to use a different example of a hot pan or something. If we pick it up, we cannot even hold it for a while, for a second before immediately dropping it. We cannot sit naked on the ice in the winter for more than a few moments. To pass even a single day without eating or drinking is considered extremely difficult, and the tiniest bee sting seems something very difficult, very hard to bear. How then will we be able to bear the heat and the cold of the hell realms, the anguish of the spirit realm, or the horrors of existence in an animal's form? One should then meditate on these dissatisfactions or sufferings of these lower realms until one is filled with terror and apprehension. What would happen if I was born in this particular realm, in this particular form? Now that one has gained the auspicious human form, abandon the causes of lower rebirth and cultivate the causes, positive ones. One should determine to apply oneself to the methods which cut off the road to these lower states of existence as much as one can. So when one has contemplated and then generates a great fear and terror of being reborn in such an existence, then one should contemplate how is it possible then to cut off existence in such undesirable states. So here then one turns through one's investigation to the three tools of refuge. And these then, as we mentioned earlier, are the two causes of turning for refuge to these three tools. One is a fear of the cycle of existence in general, and in specific, these destructive or lower realms of existence. And in addition to that, I can trust in the three tools of refuge to protect one from falling into such a state of existence. So then how, you may wonder, is it possible that the three tools, the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, are able to protect one from the fears or the terrors of the cycle of existence. So here then, one should contemplate as follows. One, thinking of the fully enlightened one, the Buddha, he is, as we read on page 8, is himself free from all fear. Why? Because he's thoroughly abandoned the cycle of existence through his practice, and has achieved the pinnacle of sentient evolution, omniscient mind. Therewith is able to guide all those who come to him for advice in ways which protect from minor fears right up to the undoing of the cycle of existence in itself, as he abides in great compassion that sees all sentient beings with equanimity. He is a worthy object of refuge for those who are beneficial to him and those who are not. So regardless of the attitudes towards the fully enlightened one, the fully enlightened one itself then views all others with the same mind of great love and compassion, and has no favoritism whatsoever. This cannot be said of many other spiritual teachers, few of whom were perfect, nor of many philosophies, most of which are filled with logical flaws, nor of many spiritual traditions, most of which are partial. So here then, one should contemplate again and again the qualities of the fully enlightened one, his teaching, and the same, and those who follow those teachings. The fully enlightened one is not something which is continually abiding. It is something which is a state, rather, which one achieves through then practicing the path leading to cessation, and through familiarity with that cessation and dissatisfaction, one then achieves the omniscient state. So one should continually reflect on these qualities until a real sense of trust is developed within one, and at that point one is turned for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Sangha.
Toba Lam Toba Bonas, Sanjay Kujola Tenebe, Lam Toba Dushibu, and the Chata Tawanam Juchula Josu, Kita Chata Tawalea, Jobal and the Chata Tawa, Sunday Tambol and the Chata Tawa, Sunday Jiba, Sunday Soba, Sunday Chivas, that any agent, Tiam Mikel and the Chata Tawa, System Mujim You are at the end, so many moments to